Hello, hello. Hey, good morning, guys. I think we're live now. All right. Hey, Alex, how's it going? Let me know if you guys can hear me and see me all right. See the screen. Hopefully today we don't get as many technical difficulties as before. Although I can already already feel the first one with my controller. Wait 1 second. Okay, so we're off to a not so great start. My Cintiq controller is not working properly. All right. Hey Rick, how's it going? Okay, I might have to restart this. Otherwise, we won't be able to do anything really. All right, so this is not very entertaining. Anyway, let's see if I can just fix this. Otherwise, I'll have to restart the stream. But basically, what we're gonna do today is continue working on this guy. We studied this creature. It went through a lot of different iterations in the previous stream. If you remember, I was hoping to actually get a um, kind of like a time lapse showing you guys the entire sort of process of how it started, like an orc type of thing, a little bit more realistic, and then now it's more like a cartoonish type of creature. But unfortunately, we got a crash and we lost the undo history. However, if you wanna have a look at this, at the process of this guy, feel free to go back. I think it's already online, if I'm not mistaken. Um, the stream from last week, and yeah, that one would show you the entire process. So let's see if I can just get this fixed. Otherwise, like I said, I'm just going to either have to work with the keyboard, which is not ideal. All right, let's see. Oh, fixed. All right. Yeah, so it was a battery problem. Ooh, all right. We are good to go, and hopefully we won't get as many hiccups in the technical department today. Let's have a look at the chat. Hey, Rick Sanchez, yeah. MYO on is serious more complicated than Photoshop? It's a different software. They both, I guess, complicated if you first come to them, but they won't be complicated once you get to them, or once you understand them. I don't think it's necessarily more complicated one than the other. Probably one is more, if you come to ZBrush from a different application, expecting it to behave like that, it is complicated. The same as Photoshop. If you've never done Photoshop before and you come from, I don't know, something very different, it might be complicated. It's just that Photoshop probably is more streamlined. It's used across the board in way more industries than ZBrush, I guess. So I don't know, it feels that it could be easier, but I think it's just the same. I don't think they're both complicated. I just think that they're different, and it's how you approach them. Okay, so for this guy, I still don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but I want to give you guys a quick view. I'm gonna bring in my Epic pen. I want to give you a quick view of what the idea is for today, what I'm planning to do, and hopefully, guys, I'll show you guys some really cool techniques. So, like I said, this I feel like this dopey look of this character, very cartoonish. It could work well for a, you know, yeah, just a stylized character, which already has it has a bit of character with the expression, the mouth and the eyes already. We could push this a little bit further, but we can add some elements to to change the look and feel. So right now it feels more like a tortoise kind of thing. I was thinking of maybe give him this look of a warrior that is very like a medieval warrior that is, or creature that is very lazy. So maybe we can just give him kind of like a chainmail type of thing, like this. And I'll show you guys some techniques to do this, which are pretty cool. Using Nanomesh, we can give him maybe, I don't know, some kind of a bigger body. That is, so this is kind of like the back, so that it feels more like heavier and bigger. And we could actually give him some shoulder plates or something like that, and straps. But that's the idea. I mean, nothing too complicated. I still want the focus to be the head. But we can do, yeah, let's say in terms of what subtools we could add to our more complexity to this character, it would be one for the body, maybe yeah, two for this plate, three for the mail chain, and if we have time, we can do the strap or something that actually holds this shoulder blade, or this, yeah, this piece of armor. And the reason I want to do something like this is because I could show you different techniques in all of the different pieces, like different workflows. It's not just sculpting, which is pretty much what we did last time. So I can show you different techniques, hopefully giving you some ideas for your own projects. So that's one thing. The other thing is, if we get to finish this within the, let's say, an hour 20 minutes mark, and we still have like about half an hour, 40 minutes, we'll get we'll give it a go in terms of how fast we can set this up, but we can maybe do a little bit of poly paint. That's the idea for today. So hopefully it's going to be interesting enough. So let's start with the body, obviously, and we're gonna refine this, because this was meant to be the body like this, but again, I want to change things a bit. And that's kind of like part of the design process, and what we have been doing for this guy is just changing the design. And I think this is a good, it's a good opportunity to show you that it's not, nothing is really set in stone. This is still a Dynamesh. It's not ready for production or anything, so we're still in the designing stages of this character. So let's go ahead and append probably a sphere would be good. Scale this up. Just using the gizmo to give it shape and a bit of rotation to get an idea of what the rib cage would be, and get these nice angles for the chest. It's gonna be just the bust, so it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be more than this. Something that we can do is actually scale this in the y-axis a little bit more, and we can bring in a deformer, the taper deformer, and this is gonna give us the ability to sort of taper this shape and give it a bit more this type of shape, kind of like what I sketched earlier. And of course, we can use the Y cone to control the curve that is describing this curvature or this tapering. So we can make it like thinner with like less broader shoulders, or we can make the shoulders really broad, big, and that doing this very simple exercise with a very basic shape at this very basic stage of the process, let's say building the body, it creates it allows us to change the look and feel of the character just by doing this. So having a character that looks like this, it is gonna have a different impact, even though the character, the face, and the expression is the same. It's gonna have a different. The viewer is gonna read it differently than if it's more like this, right? So this one will feel a little bit more bulkier, like heavier, a bit more of bodybuilder type of thing with a very heavy trapezius and heavy back, or like muscular back. Whereas this one is slightly, more chilled out. Doesn't have as that presence that the other one have. So I'm gonna go for something in between, not too big, something like that. Maybe not that much. So that's the idea, right? Of course, this tapering effect is doing it across the board in all the axes, but we could just accept that, right? And another one that we can use is the flatten deformer. So I'm gonna click on the flatten one, and that's just gonna flatten things a bit in here. We're gonna come back and fix this. I'm just doing as much as I can with deformers, so that is very quick and easy using a simple primitive. That's the idea. Let's go ahead and accept that. And then we could also use the bend curve or the bend arc. Maybe let's do the bend arc, right? And the green controllers allows you to change the curvature of the model. In fact, this is something that if you're part of my email list, I sent this earlier today, a really cool trick to create a 20-minute environment, sci-fi environment in ZBrush, and I'm using one of these deformers to show you. So right now, I'm just taking that top part and sort of try to connect that with the rest of the head. So as you can see, this is pretty quick. We can, in fact, let's just click accept. So again, this is just a blocking thing done all with deformers. Another one that it's pretty useful at this stage, because right now using all the curves and everything, it deform things quite a bit and make it a little bit more like thinner than what I wanted to. We could use the soft deformer. So deformer soft, sorry. So this one is really powerful because it creates a lattice around the volume of the mesh, or the volume of whatever object you have, and allows you to manipulate smaller points, or not smaller, fewer points. So for instance, if you have something that already has quite a bit of topology, let's say Dynamesh, a Dynamesh object that has quite a bit of topology, and obviously you don't have subdivision levels to go back to the lowest subdivision level and make large proportional changes, you could use this deformer to fine-tune the overall shape, or the primary shape, without having to do the retopology or anything like that, and just still maintain that sketchy feeling, or that prototyping of that stage of Dynamesh. So with this, you can maybe add a few points like that, just by pulling these yellow controllers that would add different points in the different axes. I think that's fine. And then using the the masking, the masking, you can just go ahead and mask a certain area, and holding Alt without letting go of the click is gonna invert that mask, or it's gonna give you the inverted mask. And with these points, you can just manipulate them like if it was a move brush, kind of. So that's good. I'm gonna mask out these ones here. Basically, the white points that you can see are whatever is not masked, or whatever you're gonna move, obviously. So I'm gonna scale these, enable symmetry. Do it again. Fill that up. All right, so that is closer. Maybe I feel like I need a bit more volume here at the back, so I'm gonna use these points here, push them so. And that's just a quick way to do it. So of course you can use the move brush, but I'm gonna show you a different approach. So let's accept that. And again, this is just a simple sphere. We haven't done much with it. We will turn that into a Dynamesh. But before we do that, we can just bring in the move brush. I already have symmetry enabled. And let's just push this a bit so that we can sort of integrate this a bit more. Something that when you work with different subtools like this, and you want to have a, let's say, a single body or like the entire body made out of different subtools, it's good to think where are the areas where you can sort of cut the model into different parts that is not going to be too obvious. So fortunately with this guy, because he's kind of like a bit fat, we can take advantage of the folds of the skin to hide the other part of the model. It's going to still be very visible just because the dimming of the subtools. So when you select a subtool, the other one gets dimmer, and vice versa. So it's going to be obvious, but you can change that in the preferences. But once you do the render, it should be okay. All I'm doing is just pushing vertex here. I'm going to bring in the clay brush. I build some volume here for the chest a bit faster. Find a bit the neck. And just do a quick reference for the shoulders. And if you guys have questions about this process or anything else really, just put it in the chat and I'll get to it. Every now and again I'll stop for a quick sip of water and I'll have a look at the questions. All right, so pretty simple. I'm going to turn this into a Dynamesh with a lower resolution of 56. Let's just polish everything. I think this might be too high in resolution for a Dynamesh blocking, but you know, it'll be fine. Maybe a little bit less. Let's go for 30, 32, just lower. So this part is again very similar to what we've done with the face so far. It's just defining some volumes, working on some, defining the primary shapes, I guess. Not super fun to watch, but this is important. It's an important part of the process. If we don't get this right, then, or at least at a stage that we're happy with, then the rest is going to be complicated to get it right. That makes sense. I'm just trying to define a bit of the anatomy here, but because this guy is meant to be kind of like fat and heavy, to create that overhanging of skin and fat. So as I build these volumes, I'm also thinking about that as well. And this part you won't see too much of it really, but it's good to have an idea so that we can place the other elements a little bit more, closer to where they should be in reality. And I don't want it to be too muscular, so even though I'm trying to define some muscles and insertions, I want to keep everything very soft. So this is starting to look a little bit too bulky. I want to keep all the transitions very soft. Something more like this. And we can bring in the damp standard brush. I'm going to start creating some folds for the neck. Again, it's not necessarily a human, so we have a bit of room to play with the distort the anatomy bit. But as long as the structure is there, and you can sort of recognize, okay, this is kind of like where the pectoral inserts into the what could be the arm. Here's the clavicle or whatever. Although because it is a fat character, the clavicle is going to be very hard to see. But as long as you sort of recognize those points, is going to be easier to make this character a bit more believable. I'm going to increase the resolution a tiny bit so we can define this a bit better. And I think that's, but I think this is as much as I want to do with this blocking of this of the body. Because again, the idea is you won't see too much of it. Or I'm thinking you might not see too much of it, and it's going to be more of a reference volume to place other assets like the shoulder pad and the other stuff. So hopefully you know what I mean. But again, it's good to have a good base. Just gonna define this a tiny bit better. This is just the clay brush, not doing anything too fancy here. And I tend to add volume at this stage, at least. I tend to add volume kind of like in the same flow of the fibers of the muscles, if that makes sense. So I just use the strokes, or my strokes to add in this volume is kind of like in this fashion, like horizontally in this case, try to follow the curvature of the muscle. I'm not saying that that's like a tip or anything that would make it look better. It's just something that I thought I should mention, that I do, that might be helpful to help you remember certain landmarks of anatomy or how everything connects. I just feel it's a bit easier. But yeah, so I'm gonna bring in, select the head, and what I'll do is I just want to add, let's go to symmetry. I want to add more volume, and then I'm going to use the chin and the double chin of this guy to try to integrate this a little bit better. So let's bring in the move brush. And then we can bring in the damp standard brush. Again, we can work a little bit freely here as well, because we might cover this with another subtool. I'm not too worried about this, although just by doing that, it feels a little bit better, at least from this camera. And then we can again use the subtool of the body to add some fat on the neck. I'm just thinking about where the folds would be, and that's pretty much all I'm doing, really. ZBrush is a good one to sort of give volume to these pieces. And the smooth brush. All right. I think I'm gonna push the shoulders a bit down. Well, forward, and maybe just give it a bit more of a refine these planes. Oh, not the plane, but the angle of the chest a bit more. An indication of the rib cage here. And I want to have a softer line here. I don't want this to be, you know, bulky, realistic character. I want to keep the cartoonish feel to it. I want a more, yeah, something more like that, like a straight line here. And trying to make this a little bit softer. I want to keep the lines of these block out very consistent with the shapes of the face. Although we have those spikes on details in the head, the forms are rather soft, very rounded. So I want to keep that all across the model. Trying to curate this part a little bit better, but I think it's looking good. I'm gonna bring the damp standard brush. Another thing is that because we have different, different resolution in different subtools, it's also a bit easy to spot the difference between, or the fact that these are two different subtools. But hopefully with the other subtools or the other elements that we're gonna add, going to be a bit easier to read. I'm gonna bring the trim dynamic. I just wanna have a nice flat set of planes here at the back. So I'm using this trim dynamic kind of like to flatten things out a bit, and that helps to refine the planes, but also as a way to polish the blobbiness of the clay brush that I use to build up these volumes. So it's a really good brush to do that sort of thing, sort of like polish at the same time that it helps you to define certain planes. So I use this a lot, especially at this blocking stage. Okay, so I think this is a good starting point for the body, in terms of having something that we can start placing things on top. And if there are like visible parts of this, we can definitely come back and refine it. Now I'm just trying to focus more on the overall silhouette. And I'm gonna bring the gizmo and I'm gonna try to see if this one works better as a thinner character like that. I think it does. So again, this is part of what we were doing last stream, just tweaking things on the go and try to figure out what's best for this character, what's more suitable. And I think this narrower frame is still fat, it's still heavy, still feels heavy, but it has a narrower frame with the shoulders not being as broad. So because we scale this non-proportionally, we can just come back and refine some of the shapes, but at least from this angle it looks a little bit better, I think. Might disagree with me. I think it looks a bit better, more interesting. Alright, so let's have a look at this, because we destroyed a bit the, not too bad, the integration that we're working on. Alright, so let's do a quick save, have a sip of water, and see if you guys have any questions. The Happy Extruder. Just wanted to jump and say hi. Thanks for your ZBrush Guides website, phone streams. No worries, man. Thank you very much, and I'm glad that you like the website and the tutorials. Yekin, how do you get thickness Marvelous Designer model in ZBrush and keep the UVs? You don't. You can modify that. You cannot modify the topology necessarily and keep the UVs. You can decimate with UVs. That's just as far as I can think of in that process. But yeah, you wouldn't be able to keep the UVs, especially because as you extrude a model or a mesh to create thickness, you're essentially almost doubling up the amount of vertex, and the software needs to know where to put those. So it's kind of like not an easy task. There might be workarounds. Just from the top of my head, the only thing I can think of is that you could decimate it, but that's not gonna. I mean, the decimation is not gonna necessarily give you thickness. It's just gonna reduce or rearrange the topology while keeping UVs, but it's not necessarily something that will work in that scenario. Hey Khalil, how's it going? Ray Martinez, where are you originally from? I was born in Colombia, but I've been moving all over the place for the past years. I've been in Australia for almost 10 years now. So, yep. So ZBrush 2020 is coming tomorrow. Yep, that's true. Very excited about that, and I'm sure you guys as well. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is work on maybe the shoulder plate. No, actually, let's do the mail chain. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and select my body, well, this character's body, and I'm gonna hold Control, make sure symmetry is enabled. I'm also gonna make sure the perspective is off, and I'm gonna give this guy I'm gonna mask the area that I wanna create the mail chain. So I think it'd be kind of like something like that. That could be the mail chain. It could even be something that he could be wearing in the head, but yeah, I think something like this should be fine. Better the mask, and I'm gonna refine that mask. So all I'm doing here is using the mask lasso to refine this mask. Holding control. At the bottom as well. And here at the back. Oops. Hold control. Alright, so that's a decent mask. You can come back with the mask pen, then just paint. It's a little bit better. But yeah, so this is a decent mask for what we're trying to do, which is kind of like a shirt, or like the base mesh of a shirt. And we're gonna extract this, and we're gonna use this as a base to place some Nanomesh that hopefully is gonna work nicely. So let's let's do that. Let's go ahead and go to the extract subpalette, or sub. It's a subsection of a subpalette. So I don't want to have any thickness, because again, this is going to be just the placement, or the mesh that we're going to use to place the mail chain. Is it called mail chain? Mail chain. Yeah. I'm sure you guys know. What I'm talking about. So I'm going to give this a value of 0. So that means it's gonna, when I extract this, it's gonna be a flat plane, just a single-sided polygon. I'm gonna click extract, and you'll see this kind of like weird artifact. This is actually good, meaning that we have no thickness. But this is just a preview. When you click extract, it gives you a preview. So if I move around, it's gone. That's why you can just modify the thickness, go to extract, and it gives you this thickness, and you go, okay, this looks kind of like what I need, or not. You can move around and say, make it a bit thicker, extract, and so on and so forth. And that's a pretty interesting process, and something that I use a lot to generate, for example, clothes, or other assets that are very close to the actual body of a character. And this is a technique that I go into a bit more depth in a course that I have called the Clothes and Drapery course. That if you're interested in that sort of thing, you can get it from ArtStation, as well as the ZBrush Guides website. And it's just more, it's just a very short, fast-paced course focusing just in creating clothes for a character, and different types of clothes and different techniques. But that's kind of like what I use. Let's go back to 0. Click extract, accept. So now that we have accepted that, we have a new subtool. So if I go into solo, here is, let's also enable double. This is the base for our chainmail. Chainmail? Yeah, I still don't know. I think you know what I'm talking about, right? Andre. Muchas gracias, Andre. Eric. Otro compatriota colombiano. Muy bien. Alex, chainmail. Yeah, I think it's chainmail. So I'm gonna clear the mask on that one. Go back to my base mesh, clear that mask as well. Just because you don't have to do it. It's just because I always forget every time that I do a mask and extract something. I always forget to come back and mask, or I usually forget, and then it just sometimes becomes a problem. So I'm trying to get into the routine of every time that I extract something, go back to the original, clear the mask, and then continue. So now that I have this, you'll see this is still, is basically using the same topology of the Dynamesh of the underlying geometry, but a little bit, blobby around the edges. So what I'll do is bring in from the deformation palette, for you guys should be in the deformation palette. I have it here on my custom UI, but I'll use this polish by groups. So polish by groups should give you, you'll have to do, in this case, there's quite a bit of topology, so you'll have to do it a few times. Polish by groups, and that's just gonna refine the edges bit by bit. Probably you can see, you can also do a little bit of a polish, and keep doing the polish by groups. And that's basically just soften this line. Okay, so that's looking not too bad. Let's go ahead and do a quick ZBrush. I'm gonna turn on the polyframe, change the material so you guys can see it a little bit better. Make sure that symmetry is activated so that we have a nice center line after the ZBrush. And I'm going to go to ZBrush. I'm going to disable adapt, just because it's going to be faster. And sometimes if you don't have something, adapt is something that is very useful if you have a lot of crevices and a lot of areas with, for example, if I have a lot of detail here at the top and not so many detail here at the back or at the bottom. If you enable adapt, then the ZBrush is going to try to adapt to the areas that have more topology and make sure that there is enough resolution or enough points there to describe those shapes. But because for the most part everything here is kind of like the same level of detail or the same surface detail, adapt is not going to do much in this case because the density of the polygons is the same. I do want to have this in half or cut it in half, actually less than half, but we'll start with that. And I could start with the legacy option, but we'll give this one a go without changing anything. I'm just going to click ZBrush, see what that does. Okay, so that did a pretty good job. Still quite a bit of polygons, and then we have these points here. These stars or n-gons and stuff, which are not ideal. I would like to get rid of these ones. So we have two options. We can at this point try the legacy, which is kind of like a different algorithm from ZBrush. Is probably giving you is going to give you something a little bit more organic. I'm not entirely sure if it's going to be better or not. What I would do at this point is try a few more of the ZBrush. So like clicking ZBrush again at half. So ZBrush is going to cut this in half again, and it's going to try to alleviate these points. But if it doesn't work, we'll just go back and try the legacy. But that's the reason I want to do another one. So let's click ZBrush. Should be faster now that we have done already one. Still have these points in here. Let's do one more. So you'll see here at the bottom, we now have a nice and continuous flow. We can soften this a little bit, but still have one here, which is not too bad. Given that we have this shape, usually you'll get something like this. I would like to have this sort of connection either closer to the neck or this area in an area that it won't be very visible when we subdivide it if we have to. Although this is just a base mesh. So let's do ZBrush again. And that's looking a little bit better. I'll do it one more time. All right, so that did a pretty decent job. See, this is what I mean, like these star points, I would like to have them closer to these areas, which I think it did a pretty decent job. In fact, this is pretty good. Quite happy. Okay, so this is our base mesh. Let's quick save. So this is the base mesh for the chainmail. Not gonna remember how you say that. The chainmail. I still don't know if it's the right word. I think it is chainmail. I'm gonna go ahead and inflate this just a tiny bit so that we can see all of it or most of it. A bit more. So because this is just a single-sided polygon, inflating, what it does is just basically scaling it, or yeah, it's scaling it, but based on the normals of all the polygons. So it's just making it more visible. All right. Now the trick here, or the idea for this base mesh, is that most of the polygons are relatively proportional or proportionally the same. Because we're going to be using Nanomesh, then we have to make sure, or ideally, we want to make sure that all of these polygons or these faces are similar or proportionally the same, so that we can basically instance whatever we're gonna do with the mail chain, and in the Nanomesh, we can instance that mesh into each polygon, and we can feed that into each polygon, and that way it's gonna be consistent. That's the thinking behind doing this. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm gonna switch back to a matcap, right? And let's have a look. Let's see. Hey Javier, how's it going? Bjorn, hey Bjorn, how's it going? Bjorn Ragnarsson, Engine 360, cool. Andre, would you mind giving me? I wouldn't mind at all giving you some feedback. Right now, I really don't have much time to actually do a proper. I can just do a quick comment, but a proper critique I really don't have right now too much time, especially during the stream. But I do have a course online called the Extra Mile. Actually, Javier, that's here. Javier, yeah. So Javier, that's here. He is in the course, and he actually. I'm just gonna do a shameless plug to Javier, because he's fantastic. He did I mean, all my students are creating some awesome work. But the reason I'm mentioning is because we have a private community with a lot of feedback, and we give a lot of feedback to each other. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, you might be interested in joining the course. But yeah, so Javier just finished his project, his first project. I'm sure he's gonna do more, but his first project looks really cool. I'm just gonna give him a quick plug because it is fantastic, and I want you guys to see the type of stuff that we're doing. So let me just find it. I'll put a link in the chat. So it's a pretty cool looking character that he developed in the Extra Mile course for you guys. And I'm sure I'm gonna have a lot more to show you guys soon. Again, the thing with the Extra Mile course is that everyone does it at its own pace, so there's no rush to complete something. So people are doing different things at different times and finishing things at different times. The link to the course, like I said, right now is closed. I just kind of open it a few times a year. But if you go to 3dconceptartist.com, there's like a waiting list there. So as soon as I open it again, I'll send you an email if you register for that. Or if you're already part of the email list, I would send you as well a link to it when it's ready. All right, let's get back to this. Okay, so I think what I've been doing just like kind of like soften this a little bit, and again trying to make everything proportional, especially at the back. They're like kind of more rectangular shapes, but again, you won't be able to see this in the render, I think. And this is just a concept, so not to worry about that. But yeah, so let's go ahead and do the mail chain. So I'm gonna do a quick save, and in a different tool, I'm gonna go ahead and work on the chainmail. So I'm gonna do probably, yeah, I mean the obvious choice is gonna be a ring. So let's start with that. But obviously we're gonna edit it quite a bit, but not really, not the shape, but we're gonna do something more interesting. So let's go ahead and in the initialize palette, we can go ahead and change this amount of resolution. This amount of resolution doesn't sound good. So the resolution or the amount of loops. So S-divide is basically the amount of subdivision in what you would say in the horizontal divide, kind of, or the vertical, and the L divide is the same thing, the amount of loops. So I want to go for something that is low, but consistently low. So Again, the idea is to reduce the resolution, but keeping an eye on the proportion. This one doesn't really matter because it's going to be just the object that we're going to instance, but I want to make sure I have something that it still reads as a ring while keeping this resolution quite low. So let's go for 8 and 8 just to see what that gives us. That's too low. 8 and 12. I think 8 and 12 is a good compromise. Yeah, I think that's gonna be good. All right, you can also change the radius, and that's gonna change how thick or thin this is going to be, which is ideal for this type of stuff. I think just because I want to keep this in line with the overall shape of the character and the visuals. I think having a fat mail chain or chainmail is actually gonna work, but we don't know until we put it in there, right? So I think having something like that, I mean, it's not that fat really. Okay, I'm just the reason I'm playing around with this. Let me just show you. So there is like a thinking behind this. I want to share it with you. So basically, I'm thinking about the diameter here, the size, because I want to place, let's say, another chain. Yeah, or another. This is a horrible. It's a horrible ring, but I want to place another ring here, right? Smaller or bigger, whatever it is, and probably try to put another one here. But basically, the thinking behind these horrible circles is that I want to have this width of the ring at least 1, 2 inside. So 1, 2, and 3. Sort of like, yeah, so that you can fit 2 of these within it. That's kind of like the idea. I don't know if that makes any sense. It will make more sense once I actually do it. All right, so now that I have this ready, I'm gonna change this to a polymesh 3D. So now we can edit this polygon freely like any other mesh. So I'm gonna do a couple of things. So I wanna create a Nanomesh brush that has a few different variants to see which one is gonna work better in terms of connectivity. I have done this in the past, so I have an idea of like if I were to do this in a more of a like if I'm doing this for myself or for my project, I kind of like know almost exactly what to do, as in because I've done it before, so I know what to go for. But if you don't know, if you haven't done it, I'm gonna show you the process of how you can try an error and try the different options, because this is when I first tried to do something like this when Nanomesh was released. I was the same. I was like, okay, how can I combine this? How can I do this? And I'm just gonna show you. So for that, I'm gonna create a Nanomesh that has different options. So I'm gonna start with a single one. I'm gonna duplicate that, hide this, and this one I'm gonna duplicate it again. Right, so I have 2 sitting in the same spot. I'm gonna bring in the gizmo, and I can move it like that. Right, just to sort of connect this in a way. So first, let's just do it simpler. And move this on the x-axis. So this is kind of like, oops, sort of like that, and then like that. So the x and the z-axis. So if I put this one right now as it is, this is kind of like overlapping, right? But what I want them to do is to connect. So I'm gonna try to move them in a diagonal. So I can just do it with the free move tool or the free gizmo tool, but I can also hold the Alt key and rotate this. So that's what I'll do. I'm gonna try to do something like that, and then just push this one in a more of a diagonal line towards the center. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Right. So now we have these 2 meshes. They're 2 different subtools, and they're overlapping. They're not connected. So what I want them to do is rotate them a little bit so that one connects with the other. I'm gonna reset this by holding Alt and clicking on the reset rotation. And I'm gonna rotate this in this fashion, holding Shift. So maybe 20 degrees. Again, this is like a trial and error process, trying to show you that. Select the other one, rotate holding Shift the same amount of degrees. You'll see they're kind of like interconnected. We can definitely go ahead and tweak this a bit more, as in, fix this, maybe rotate it a little bit in this axis and the other one as well. But I'm going to start with this as it is, and then I'm going to merge them down. So merge down. Okay. I'm also going to give these individual polygroups just by auto grouping this, because they're not sharing any topology. It's very easy to do. So that's one thing. Let's go ahead and do another one. So I'm going to duplicate this. So I have the single one, the duplicate, the connected one, and then I have another one. I'm going to hide the second one. For this one, what I'll do is I'm going to show you something really cool that you can do to try and create this type of patterns in with Nanomesh. Let's have a look. Where is it? Here. Array mesh. So array mesh is kind of like an instancer. It just creates an array of meshes of whatever you have. I use this in a variety of ways for very specific purposes. For this, kind of like trying to get the right combination and rotation of these assets to connect is a really good asset. So if you click array mesh, right, it automatically creates this duplicate, which repeats. Basically, there is one instance of the same object already in there. It's just in the same spot, so you won't be able to see it. But as soon as you use this offset to move it around, so I'll show you what this does. And again, this is something that I always struggle with, and I always I have to actually do it to realize where I am in the space. And this is one of the exciting things as well about the ZBrush 2020 that's coming tomorrow. I don't know if you have seen Paul Gabry did a stream on the 7th, and he showed some of the did a sneak peek on the features, and there is the cam view that allows you to visualize in what area or in what plane of the camera you're constantly at. So that's it might not sound like as exciting, but it's a very, very useful piece of feature. So anyway, because this is the x-axis, right? And is it? Yeah, x-axis, I think. So that means that we can take in the offset. Basically, we're gonna offset an instance of this object. We can take the x amount, right? And we can push it this way, right? So if we do that, what ZBrush is gonna do is gonna take this one, and it's gonna offset the not this one exactly, the instance of that. So it's gonna offset it a little bit, and then it's gonna take this other one, it's gonna offset it a little bit, right? So you'll see kind of like what I'm trying to do here. The great thing is that this is gonna be only two, as in we're gonna have the original and another one. So we're gonna have the original mesh and another and an instance of that. That's what this repeat 2 means, that we're gonna repeat it, right? But then we can do another one on top of it, or another array mesh on top of this one, and then for example we can take these 4 pieces, so 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we can push them in the y-axis. Sorry, in the z-axis. I think. Again, this is what I meant, that we probably have to test these things. But we can move this in the z-axis, right? And ZBrush is gonna take the original plus the new Nanomesh and move them up. So we're gonna end up with something like this, right? So you'll see what I'm trying to do here. It's kind of like figuring out the pattern before we create the Nanomesh, okay? And the Nanomesh is gonna be only these 2 pieces, but having an idea of how it works in terms of the array mesh allows us to visualize how they interconnect and whether or not we need to add more or rotate it. And again, this is part of what I did ages ago to try to figure out what's the best way to connect these patterns. especially when you have something that is interconnected. All right, so let's push this X amount forward, and that's what I meant. So basically, you see right now with something like that, what's doing. So basically, if we put this single set of meshes next to each other, right, in a mesh, this is what's going to happen, right? It sort of looks interconnected, but it doesn't look really good, right? There's a lot of intersection, and this is just creating this single array mesh. Now, what's great about this is that we don't have to go back and say, oh, this arrangement of the two rings didn't work. We have to go back and do it again. We can simply select, let's say, this one. So remember, we have polygroups. Hold Control and Shift to select this. I'm gonna mask that. Bring back everything. Bring in the gizmo. Center it to the unmasked areas. And whatever I do with this is gonna be reflected in the other mesh or in the array. So we can do this to sort of rotate things around and see if we can make a better connection between the original and the instance. So what I'll do is I'm going to try to rotate this. Again, we're trying things here. So 20 degrees or minus 20 degrees, something like that. So that sort of alleviates a little bit of the problem. Let's go ahead and invert that. Center the pivot. Reset rotation. And do the same thing from the bottom, but on the opposite side. So holding Shift. I think we did 20, right? 20. All right. So that looks a little bit better, right? I'm gonna clear the mask. Still feel like it's not interconnecting everything, right? It's just it looks a little bit better. It's like this. This one, this mesh or the blue one, I think the one that has the blue polygroup is grabbing this one and this one, right? So that's working nicely. Yeah, and this one is also capturing a couple of rings. So that's working great. So this is what I wanted to show you, the process of figuring out how this moves and interconnects, especially. And this doesn't have to be about just rings. It could be just scales, plates, anything that you want that you can instance or that you're planning to duplicate across a mesh. Already on the hour mark, so we have to move a little bit faster. Let's go ahead and do another array just to show you that. Basically, if you append a new, this basically adds a new instance within the array meshes. I'll see if that makes sense. So if I click append new, now we have two transform stages. So it's kind of like an exponential thing. Let me see if I can explain it here a little bit better. So we have, let's do with a cube or a square. So we have the cube that is the original, this original cube, and that's the equivalent to these original rings. Okay. Then the first array mesh that we did, so the array number 1, you'll see here we have this transform stage and we have a number of 2. So the first one, the first transform stage, we just took the X offset, so the offset in X, and we move it a little bit to the right. Okay, so this is taking the original and is, let's call it array number 1, is offset in X that little bit. Now, because I went ahead and did an append, so append new, it basically means take whatever we have already, which means the original and the instance offset it to the X on the X axis, and do another one. So now we have a second set of array meshes, and we can take, we can keep doing this in the X, Y, Z, whatever we want. I think we're gonna go for Z. We'll have to double check this, but anyway, we're gonna push this down. So basically, Zero is gonna take the original, the previous array mesh, and then it's gonna create another one with the 2, right? So this is going to be array number 2, or the transform stage number 2, and it's going to be offset in Z. I think it's Z or Y, one of those. So that allows us to duplicate things. And if you want, you can keep going even further. You can do another one, so a third, append a new one, a third stage, and then you can take these 4 and then push them like that. And then you can create something very complex, right? And all you need to do to update everything is just change this original mesh. Okay, that's the idea with the array mesh. So now that I have this stage, what I'll do is push the Z axis. Yeah, so it was the Z axis. Push this up. So it looks all right. There's certain areas like here where it doesn't work as, doesn't look as great, but that's part as well of the thickness of the thickness of these rings. But we can, again, like I said, we have, if we go into polyframe, these are just instances. We only have 2 that we need to worry about. So we can do the same thing. We can figure out how to connect these 2 together, or we can actually add a few more. So that's what I wanted to show you, that once you have the instances and your array, you can play a little bit more with this. So I'm happy with how this looks. It could be improved to have some more connectivity and not as much overlapping, but I'm kind of happy with how this looks, like the shape of these 2 rings. So I'm going to leave it as it is for the time being. I'm going to duplicate it, so in case what I'm going to do doesn't work or whatever, I come back to this one. Just because I need to move a little bit faster so that I can show you the rest of the stuff. Yeah, so what I'll do now is I'm going to duplicate these. I'm gonna bring them up, oops, hold Control and Shift to isolate, hold Control, mask, right? Invert that selection. So now we have only the green one on mask. You can ignore the rest of the arrays. They're just gonna do whatever we do with the originals. So I'm gonna bring in the gizmo and I'm gonna hold Control. Actually, let's reset the rotation by holding Alt and click on the rotation. I wanna hold Control, click and drag, and that's just creating a third mesh or a third ring, right? I'm gonna give it a polygroup. Oops. There we go. So I had to unmask things. So, all right, back where we are, where we were. So now we're gonna use this one to reset the rotation. Already reset it. Cool. And I'm gonna work with this. If you remember, we use increments of 20 degrees. So I can go back and have like a perfect alignment of this. So I can go Shift, rotate 20, reset rotation, Shift, rotate 20, reset rotation. So now this is kind of like aligned nicely. Now this one, I'm gonna bring it closer to this guy. I wanna see if I can combine these 2 together, and also holding Control, duplicate it there. So this one is creating a way more complex look. Hold Shift, rotate 20 degrees. So you'll see what I'm trying to do is maybe just thinking that we might have to edit the array mesh so that it's easy for you guys to see what I'm trying to do. I think I'm complicating things too much. I think the previous one was good, but basically what I'm trying to do is add more instances so that it's easy to connect. So if we disable array mesh, this is what's happening, right? We have 3 connected, like a chain of 3, and this 4th one, I'm just trying to connect it, do the inverse of the green one. Don't know if that makes sense or not. Basically a duplication of the blue one, but slightly shifted. So I'm doing what the array mesh was giving us, a little bit more manual. That's really what I'm trying to achieve here. I'll give it a polygroup so that you can select it, and then do the same thing with this one. So almost is like the green one is holding or connecting 4 of these, right? And I'm doing it, I'm kind of like eyeballing it, or eyeballing it. But let me show you what I'm trying to do, because this is getting out a little bit out of hand. Basically, I want to have, if you see at this, if you look at this from the top, right? I want to have one in the center that connects everything like this, and then 4 like that, right? So from the front, like you see here, is 1 in the middle, and then you have 4 like that. And I'm just good, like I said, this is kind of like a bit not precise, but ideally you want to have something, oops, aligned this way and then in this way, kind of like in an X. So that way when we duplicate it, we can get this one again here, once again here, and so on and so forth. That's the thinking behind it. So I'm just gonna try to do it manually. I'm not gonna go for this one, just wanted to show you another troubleshooting. Kind of. All right. So if we enable array mesh, it's working, but we can go ahead and go to the first stage and refine the amount. So the exact amount of this is just a working, it's kind of like a working file only, because once we created Nanomesh, it's going to have its own connectivity. This is just to test the pattern, nothing else. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit crowded, but it's kind of working. Now, this is, again, this is just the array mesh. I'm going to select this one. And remember, this one is the one that we edited. So what I can do is turn off array, because like, let's say we're happy with this. I'm going to turn the array mesh and just keep this simple as we had them. Again, the array mesh is just to test the pattern. You can play around with this as much as you want. But let's say that we're happy with this pattern. What I'm going to do now is go to the brush thumbnail, create insert multi-mesh. Oops, not multi-mesh, sorry, another one. Create insert mesh, create a new one, and that's just the little chain on its own. And I'm gonna turn this into a nanomesh. So I'm gonna click on create nanomesh brush. All right, so now this is a nanomesh brush, and go back to our character. I'm gonna do a quick save. All right, and I'm gonna go into solo mode just so that it's easier to work with this, and go to the Nanomesh palette. All right, and I'm gonna go ahead and click and drag. Before I do that, actually, I'm gonna right click on the face, and I'm gonna define what the target is. So by default, the action is a Nanomesh because that's the brush that we created. The target would be polygroup all. That way we apply that little chain, the 2 rings of the chain to everything, or one of those is going to be instanced in every single piece or every single polygon. And that's the reason I wanted to make them kind of like uniform. I'm going to click and drag, and that creates chainmail. Right? So that's kind of like working on its own already, and we haven't even tweaked anything. So if I click on show placement, this switch is going to hide that placement mesh that we created, the kind of like the shirt, and it's just going to give us the chainmail. Done. So we have this character now with the chainmail, and because the Nanomesh is just an instance on top of the placement mesh, we can actually take the move brush, right? And we are actually moving just the plane. So we can take, for example, these areas that look intersecting, and we can just push them out. And we're not distorting the actual Nanomesh. We're just moving the planes underneath. I think this one gives us a pretty decent result without doing much, as in without doing too much tweaking, but we're gonna get to that in a second. Just wanted to show you how quick this is and how exciting this technique could be for this type of stuff. All right, I'm gonna take a quick break. I'm gonna grab some water, and we still have about 40 minutes, so I reckon we can tweak this a little bit, do the plate, and hopefully make this guy a little bit more interesting. But I think we might have to drag this into another stream to finish it up. All right. Make sure that if you have any questions, just drop them in there. What's the screenwriting software called? Yeah, Epic Pen. Thanks, Alan. All right, just give me 1 second. I'll be back. All right, back. All right, let's see. Ian, Johnny, you got some need to ZBrush? Yeah, you can totally pose and paint sculptures in ZBrush. With pose for poses, you can use the Gizmo 3D masking, the transpose master. For paint, you can use polypaint. That's a great way to give a polypaint, sorry, a color pass to your models. You don't even have to have UVs. You can directly paint the vertex. So pretty good. Hey, Civil. Oh, great. Yeah, Michael has an awesome channel, Michael Pavlovich, and he went through my comic style render guide and turned that into videos, which is pretty handy. I'm really glad that you found the resources useful at the ZBrush guides. Awesome. Andrea, so a quick recap: to create the mesh pattern using array, then convert it into mesh and use the Nanomesh to create the chainmail, right? Now you only use the array mesh to test the pattern, so that it allows you to duplicate things and offset things, so that you see whether or not they're actually combining. That's just the reason I use array mesh to test the pattern. But you can, as long as you have any mesh, really, you turn that into an insert mesh and then into a Nanomesh, and that's it. Okay, so now that we have these, we can play around. I actually really like the how it is looking, and there's some areas that are not connected, but I could go ahead and manually do those. But I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna duplicate this and chuck this into one of my original folders, so that it's out of the way, and we can just change this. Um, so right now this nanomesh is set to prop, so it's basically populating the entire mesh at the same size. The size is set to 0.7, but we can just go ahead and refine this like that, and you'll see, because the size of the polygons here around the neck are closer together or they're smaller, then immediately these ones are more connected, whereas here at the bottom they are not, right? So that's one of the things that I wanted to keep as proportional as I could, all the faces underneath. But there are a few things that we can do, and we can set these manually as well. We can change the prop or proportional mode to fit. So fit is going to make sure that the size of the whatever mesh you inserted is going to fit the size of the polygon. So these ones here at the towards the top are shorter or smaller than the ones here, and we can increase the size so that it's more evident. But what I don't like about this fit is that not only is going to change the size based on the underlying geometry and the size of the polygons underlying, but it's also stretching things to fit. And because we don't have something that is, if we had like maybe it's like a little stick or just a nail or something, it's gonna try to stretch it non-proportionally, and it's gonna look distorted. So this one is really good for certain things. In this case, is not the best. And fill is basically doing the same thing, but it's filling the entire area of the polygon. But it doesn't look very different one from the other in this case. If I set it to 1, maybe if it's not gonna be very visible in this case. So of course I'm gonna go for prop, because that's the best way to connect all of those. And I'm gonna try to find something in between, as in something that is not necessarily. I'm gonna go for something like that. You know what? Let's keep it simple. I'm gonna go for something like this, and then I'm gonna edit something else. Right. So this chainmail is, I think I like it for the type of character that I'm doing. But if you want for something maybe more realistic, or you just want to change, make it something a little bit thinner, that looks thinner at least, you can instance the nanomesh within itself. That sounds a little bit weird, but basically you can do an array or a tile of the meshes. So using the H tile and V tile, it basically takes those two rings that we have, and they're gonna and ZBrush is gonna tile those on each face basically. So I can do that, say 2 and 2. So now we're just styling the nanomesh within itself. So in a way, what we're doing with this vertical tiling and horizontal tiling is replicating what we did with the array mesh, and that's why it's a good idea to use array mesh as a starting point to test this pattern, right? And I think this looks quite good. Let me just do a quick recap of what I did there. Oops. Right. So we started with something like this, right? I'm gonna do a different color. Yep. So we started with something like that, and that is using this prop with whatever size we had here before. And now what I did was to take the H tile. So let's say that this is a single polygon, and we have those two rings in each one of these underlined polygons. And by doing this, what we're gonna do is basically tell ZBrush that we want in the same area or in the same polygon, we want to have horizontally two of the same. So we want to have something like that, right? That's basically the idea. And by tiling it vertically is, of course, the same principle, but vertically. So we're gonna have something like that on each polygon, right? So there's an issue with this, and that's the reason why I wanted to show you this and show you the array mesh approach. The issue is that ZBrush is tiling this, right? But is basing it in the whole in the volume of the mesh. So what I mean by that is that these ones are going to be connected or are not going to be connected. So there's no connection here, no connection here, here, or here, right? Because basically what's happening is we have this ring and then we have this ring. So ZBrush is assuming that that's the entire volume that we want to tile. So it's going to say, okay, this is the furthest point to the left, the furthest point to the right, the top and bottom, and it's going to create, it's going to assume that this is the entire volume, right? And it's going to take that entire volume, tile it in horizontally and vertically. So it's going to duplicate this exactly the same thing. So hopefully you know what I mean, right? And that's the problem or the issue with this tiling, right? That there's not gonna be any connection in here, in here, in here, or in here. So it's probably visible. Maybe here. It's not very visible. I mean, you can get away with it, but if you want to do it properly or more accurately, this is I want to show you that this is kind of like one of the drawbacks of using this. However, that's not necessarily a huge problem because we have the ability to change the size. So basically, if we have, did I close it? No. Basically, we can keep this idea, right? These things are still not connected, but let's say that this is one of the polygons, right? And this is the current size at whatever it is, at 0.7. We can play around with this slider and take this entire volume, and even though it is tiling, we can scale it up. So we can end up with something like that. Something that is bigger on this side. What am I doing? Something that is like this and like that, right? So we can actually extend the size of the nanomesh away from or past the bounding edges of the underlying polygon, if that makes sense. Hopefully you see what I mean. Second, I can take the scale, play around with that until I can connect some of those. So I think this one is a good ratio. I'm going to duplicate this entire mesh with the nanomesh, put it in here, because if I like this, I can come back to that. But then I'm going to show you something else. I'm going to try to move faster because I really wanted to at least have the shoulder blade done for today, and then do the rest in the next stream. Yeah, we'll have to um, continue next time. But basically, the other thing that I want to mention is this is at 0.65. Just gonna make a note of that, just to make sure that I do it later, that it works at that size, or I'm happy with this size. But one of the things is if I reduce the size, you'll see some of them, some of the chains are aligned differently. So let's see, kind of like all of these ones right here, they're pointing, they're kind of like pointing out upwards. But these ones here next to it, example, are pointing, are sort of like aligned this way, right? And that's kind of like across the board, you know, very randomly in a way. So that's kind of that. The next step is how these meshes are aligned along the surface that we've been using to place them, and that's here on the alignment. So right now there's no alignment, so it's just place them whatever ZBrush thinks is good. It's placing it like that. But we have a bunch of different options. Now, align to normal is probably a good option to start. I honestly just go ahead and test all of them and see which one works best. Align to the long edge is if you have a polygon that is square, right? And they're exactly the same. These are exactly the same. Align to short edge and long edge are going to be pretty much the same thing. But if you have a polygon that is stretched, like we have around this area, for example, right? ZBrush is going to say, okay, align them based on either the short edge, so this way, or the long edge, this way, because this one is, I don't know, bigger than this one, right? That's the idea. So I'm going to start with normal, and for the most part, the normal gives me a pretty decent result. That's much better aligned. All of them are aligned to the normal of the polygon, and like I said, this is a great start to try to align the Nanomesh with the way that you want it to. So that's much better. Now I can come back to the size, which was I cleared 0.5, I think, or anyway, we can just eyeball it again. So 0.60. Okay, and there you go. That's kind of like the way that I would approach this chainmail. Now, you might argue that the no alignment works a little bit better in terms of how random it looks, but I haven't finished, right? So it's important to start with a clean. It's almost like blocking, right? At this point, we're just setting things up in Nanomesh. It's the same thing at the blocking stage, but then you can go ahead and fine tune things and add details, add randomness. But I'm happy with the size and I'm happy with the alignment. And now we can go ahead and use the rotation. So rotation in Z or Y, whatever. This is going to have to be very slight variation of very small values so that we don't change that or we don't overlap things too much. But you can add a little bit of variation here. I'm going to go for 2 and 2 here, and also add some variation here. So you'll see this is starting to vary things a bit. And of course, again, it's not necessarily connecting everything, but like in here, you'll see some gaps, but it's not too bad. We can actually play around with the smooth brush, just smoothing, or with the move brush to push these things away. And remember, I'm just pushing the geometry underneath, so I'm not affecting the proportion of the chain. I'm actually just moving the placement. And we can just take these polygons and push them closer together so that we have more connection here. So if you want to be more precise about this whole process, then all you need to do is make sure that the underlying geometry is a little bit more proportionally even. Okay, I think I'm happy with this. I was gonna go for the bigger and thicker pieces, but I think this one works fine. Just all I'm doing here is taking the mesh underneath and trying to alleviate some of the compression in certain areas. That is not so that it feels more like a woven pattern of these pieces, especially here at the top where the polygons are quite small. You can show placement one. So this is what's happening. So yeah, so because these ones are slightly less proportional, you get more concentration of the nanomesh. Yeah, but I think that looks all right. Cool. So all we did in this stream was this nanomesh and the body, but I think it works. Do a quick save, and just to wrap it up, we have about 15 minutes. Let's see. Have any questions? What's the difference between nanomesh and micromesh? So micromesh is something, it's kind of like the early version of nanomesh, and it's something that happens at render time. So you can do certain things with micromesh that that would only be visible, or anything that you do with micromesh would only be visible when you hit render. Whereas with nanomesh, you actually have geometry. So in other words, micromesh is a render effect that works similar to nanomesh, but it's just at render time. And nanomesh is an actual mesh, so you can do pretty much anything that you do with other meshes. You equalize function in C-modeler to make the polygons equal in size. You could try that. I'm not sure if that's gonna be giving you, it's gonna give you the effect that you want, because the equalize is based on, is not, we could try that, but it's not gonna give you the result that you want, I think. Cool. All right. Yeah, just to finish up, we have about 15 minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and set up the plate and hopefully do the blocking of the rest of the armor, just to, or the rest of whatever we're gonna do, just to so that we can finish the block out, and in the next stream we wrap it up, wrap up this guy. So the nanomesh is done. All right, and because we have the other meshes, we have some other variants of the nanomesh if we wanted to. So I'm gonna push this up. My working files. What is this? Oh, hang on. I think at a different. Hang on. Trying to figure out what I have here. What? Oh, this is. All right. That's a. It's a quick. You know what? This doesn't look too bad. We can come back to that later on. But that's roughly what we've been working on. So I'm gonna rename this. Rename that. Name the entire folder. Rename. Fully working files. All right. Now let's go ahead and append a. Let's see. Sphere, maybe. Yep. Yeah. Makes sense to have a sphere. For the shoulder blade, I'm gonna go into solo mode. and I'm gonna work on this with symmetry so that it's easier, and I'm gonna use a deformer that I haven't used in a while, and is really one of my favorites. It's called the where is it? So project primitive. This one here. So project primitive is gonna take an actual primitive that is driven by a function or by like a mathematical curve values, and it's gonna give me some magic basically. But before I do that, I wanna do a quick block out of this. So it's gonna be slightly flatter, that, and probably elongated. And I'm gonna bring in the flatten deformer, push this up as well. So that's kind of like the base of that shoulder blade. You could actually taper this, that it, it feels a little bit better. Not entirely sure this is the right move. A tiny bit of taper. Okay, now I'm gonna bring in the project primitive, and you'll get this craziness. But it's actually really cool. So what you see here is just like a bulging sphere, and that's the actual primitive that is being projected within this mesh. So we can push this up and down, and it's just projecting, kind of like deforming that geometry, and you can scale this up and down, and that's kind of what I wanted to do. Now you can change the type of primitives. There is actually a more in-depth tutorial or guide in the ZBrush guides that it's just about the project primitive deformer. So I'll explain all of the controllers and what they do and everything else. I'm going to try to move faster here. I'm going to change the primitive to type 2, which is going to give me a cylinder. Oh, is it a cylinder? See, I haven't used this in a while. It's a cylinder. Oh, 3 is a cylinder. Now I have to try to remember. Okay, I think it's, yeah, number 3 is a cylinder. And there is also a slide blending. So basically what I'm doing is taking a cylinder and pushing it, but this is within the same mesh, so it's really, really useful. I'm gonna rotate this around. A little bit, then scale that way, and then non-proportional. I just want to create kind of like this part of the poly, or the shoulder blade, the border. Okay, but it's a really cool way to get this type of shapes really quickly, and it's very interactive. So I absolutely love this deformer. And you can use the blending to blend this so that it's not as harsh. Turn this off. Not as harsh as sharp line. I'm gonna blend that and also use the opacity a bit. I'm gonna exaggerate this and then use the opacity. So you have opacity and you have blending. I think that's looking all right. It's done up a little bit. Go. I know there's like different ways to achieve the same result. I just want to show you something else, like a different technique. And what I really like about this is that it just, everything is happening real time. Like you can see the effect. You can go back and tweak it very, very quickly. You can go ahead and do another one or another mesh. So if you, white one here. So if I push the white cone here, that's gonna kind of like accept this as it is. So now we can take another primitive and project a different one. So I have the same, kind of like the same duplicate of this. I can go ahead and reset that actually. but I'm gonna change the type. Oh, look. Okay, so I just changed the type of the modifiers of this cylinder, and I created this quick sort of spike, and we can just obviously change it quite a bit. But this is something that's going to be part of the actual blade. It's not something that we have to add afterwards. And again, we can tweak the sharpness of it. We can tweak the blending and tweak the opacity. Right? So we have that there, and what's great about this is, let's say we're happy with this sort of original, the first piece, right? We can go ahead and accept this with the white one. So that's giving us another one, and we can just move this here. You know, something like that. I'm not particularly happy with this, but I just wanted to show you that you could do this type of thing. So I'm gonna undo all that, and I'm just gonna scale this and leave this one inside, and click accept, and there we go. This is our mesh now. I'm gonna Dynamesh this, maybe with a high resolution. Make sure symmetry is activated. I'm gonna move this out any bit. Right. Another thing that you can do with these deformer, with the primitive deformer, is actually carve out things. So if I bring in the primitive, project primitive, I'm gonna reset, full reset, so that we have the starting point again. This one is pretty cool in the way that it works, because if you push the primitive that is being projected out of the bounding box of the volume that you're trying to affect, is going to subtract it. Let's see if I can explain this a little bit better. This is really powerful. So basically you have the object that you are modifying. So you have the shoulder plate. So this is the original. Let's call it the original volume, OV, just quickly. And then we have the bounding box for the primitive that we are affecting. So this is the project primitive one here. And right now, because of the modifiers and the type of object that we're using, the blending, sorry, the opacity and the blending, or vice versa, blending and opacity, all of these controllers, what is happening is giving us this rounded, almost like a sphere. It's a primitive sphere, basically. So ZBrush is using that project primitive, which is defined by these controllers, and right now it's just a sphere, to take this original mesh and is projecting it, or is deforming it, right? So that's what you get, this type of shape. Now what's great about all of these is, like I said, you have two different bounding boxes or two different volumes. So the primitive, the project primitive, the middle point is right here, right? So this is important, because whatever this middle point of the entire volume of the whatever primitive you're projecting is going to determine whether you're adding or subtracting to your mesh. So right now it's adding, because this middle point is within this volume, right? Hopefully this is not complicating things too much, but I thought, you know, I explained this because it's quite useful. But as soon as you take this point, the center point of this project primitive, outside this bounding box, so let's say if I move this down around here, right? So this is going to be the new pivot, or like the new center of the volume. And of course, and I think I just moved it a little bit as well. Right? This is getting a little bit messy, but I took this middle point and pushed it out of this bounding box of the original mesh. And what happens now is that Siri is going to take the same sphere, same volume, the same project, but because this point is outside of the bounding box of the original volume, is going to actually subtract this mesh. So you'll end up with, let's add another color. This is a real mess. You end up with a mesh that looks like this. Whoosh, sorry, much. You end up with a mesh that looks like that, right? Because now this is not affecting this area. Go in here and then goes in like that. All right. So it's gonna make more sense when I explain it, but this is kind of like the theory behind it. So it's as simple as just taking this one and pushing it. You see the center point is right here. As soon as I pass that bounding box, it's still adding, boom, subtracting. So now you have this mesh. So it's just a matter of where you place that center point. But what's great about this, obviously, is that you can just do this. Like, it's nothing to do with booleans or anything. It's just simply projecting primitive. So it's one of the best ways to blocking things out, right? And you push this down. You can make it as sharp as you want. So again, you have the blending and you have the opacity. So the blend is gonna blend between the primitive and the original mesh, and the opacity is gonna give like a softer transition, basically, like this. But that's not what I want. I want something a bit harsher, like this. But yeah, that's pretty much it. maybe I went a bit over the top with the explanation with all of this stuff. But yeah, it basically is whenever the center point of this project primitive bounding box is outside of the original mesh, Siri is going to subtract that mesh, or it's going to push things in rather than subtract, because subtract is more like a Boolean thing. Anyway, I'm going to click accept. So now we have this quick shoulder blade that we created with the gizmo. Once you get familiar with this process, it's just, very, very quickly. We are about to finish, so just to finish this up, I'm going to bring in the bend arc. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to place this so that I know how big it's going to be. Rotate it 90 degrees, something like that. I want to put it in this shoulder. Scale it in the y-axis a bit more bulky. And I'm just trying to find the right angle for this. Right. I think something like that. But because I haven't changed the actual rotation of the pivot of this volume, in other words, the current Gizmo 3D and the axis are aligned with the volume, I can just go ahead and bring in something like the bend arc, and you'll see it's gonna be kind of like aligned with the entire volume, and we can just bend this entire thing a bit more, like that. From this angle, actually, more. And of course, we can change curvature. Click OK, accept, and there we go. We can refine a bit more the placement. But sort of like the blockout is there. I'm not sure if like this. I think it should be a little bit higher. Yeah. Again, this is something that we have to, tweak a little bit later. But I'm gonna taper this tiny bit. Try to find an interesting shape here. And I'm also trying to find a way to break up the silhouette there, just a little bit to make it a bit more. I'm gonna spend a little bit of time in here, and we're getting towards the 2-hour mark, so I'm gonna leave it there. And then I'll just do kind of like something to connect this, or a leather strap, something to connect this. But we're getting there with this guy. So yeah, just a quick recap. We did the body today, just a simple Dynamesh sphere. We push things around, and it's a separate subtool. Then we took that and created some extract with a mask. So we mask out a part of the body in the shape of this shirt. We extract that. We did a serum measure. Then we did the chain mail or mail chain, whatever that is. A series of rings, couple of rings. Use that as a nanomesh to populate all of this and connect all that. And then we use a simple sphere with the project primitive, to create this blockout of this shape. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it here, and the next stream we're gonna carry on with this character. We can add a few more details, maybe some necklaces and some stuff that this guy has been collecting, whatever that is. Some straps here, some leather straps that are holding the shoulder blade, the shoulder plate. And yeah, hopefully we have enough time to also give it some poly paint. But yeah, I think I'm happy with how this guy is looking so far. Let's see if there is some last minute questions, and I'll answer them. Cool. So nope. All right. Awesome, guys. So I'm gonna leave this here, and I'll see you next stream. I'm gonna have to check if I'm back next week, but I think I will. So yeah, just have a look at the streaming schedule. But what I'll do probably is, you know what? Maybe we won't be able to continue with this next stream, because I can probably do a rundown of the new features once ZBrush 2020 is released. So we can do kind of like a special one-off stream next time. But yeah, we'll definitely continue with this guy at some point. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. So thanks for tuning in and stopping by. Appreciate it. And I'll see you guys later.